What's up, Fathom Church, and welcome to the Going Deeper podcast. This is your host, Kyle Knight. We are here with Karina Bost. Hello, Karina.
Hello.
And Chris Martin. Hello, Chris.
Buenos dias, senor.
Buenos dias. It is a good day today. It's a good day because we're talking on our new episode about loneliness, this topic of loneliness. So maybe a little bit of a deeper episode here. But Chris, why are we talking about loneliness?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. As the three of us, minister to Fathom, as we're in relationship with even our friends and our family, and other people in our lives, one of the things that I think is a cultural point of conversation is loneliness. I mean, I just think this seems to be something that not just Christians are talking about, but the world is talking about. And at least from where my brain has been in the last, let's say, decade, a lot of the cultural commentary surrounding loneliness has been directly associated, or at least indirectly associated, with the digital age and how that has changed communication and relationships. So we are more connected than we have ever been as a human people. I mean, your parents live in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they live in Chiang Mai. They live 9 time zones away. 13 time zones away.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of time zones. It's opposite. It's flip-flopped. It's so messed up. And right now, I mean, they're asleep right now, but right now you could FaceTime them.
I could. I FaceTimed my sister this morning.
Yeah. There would be a visual proximity of your father on your iPad in my office with, I don't know how much delay, but not much.
Yep.
I mean,
Right.
maybe a second of delay. I mean, it's wild. So we are more connected than we've ever been. You not just phone calls and FaceTime and video chats and what's all the video stuff now? The video chatting,
Anything
stuff.
that happens on your phone.
Zoom and
Sure.
what was the one before Zoom? I had it in my brain and it's gone.
Skype.
There it is.
Skype.
Remember Skype?
Skype.
Yeah, that's dead. But I mean, like all of these things are, I mean, we're living like the Jetsons, right? Little videos. It's like, I mean, it's a different world we live in. But in addition to that, there's now a whole frontier of social connections that are online as well, right? So you have friends on Facebook. Have you ever met all of those friends? I mean, some of them probably you haven't, right? There's like, we've changed the social dynamic of our world. So friends on Facebook, followers on Instagram, we have little windows into our worlds as we are posting things and doing all this. Well, all of this claimed, whether formally or informally, claimed that this would bring humanity closer together, that we'd be able to have better relationships, that we'd be able to keep up with people that we otherwise were unable to keep up with historically. So I have friends from elementary school who I know where they live. Now, I've not talked to them in 35 years.
What a creep.
But I can see pictures of their kids and that's weird. I mean, we can all be honest. That's weird. And we're not even talking about the weird edge of social media. We're just talking about like people you actually had a relationship with at some point. So all of that to say, every statistic that is out there, every study that's out there is saying that loneliness is on the rise. It's higher than it's ever been. Loneliness, anxiety, depression, like for all the promise of I can call my dad in Thailand right now, it is not fixing the human condition problem, which is where do I belong? Who are my people? How do I actually belong with a tribe? And these are like ancient problems that we're trying to fix with Apple products. So that's maybe like a long-winded wandering explanation of why we're talking about loneliness. Because it seems to be a huge issue.
Well, and Karina, we were just talking about this before you hit record, but you've heard, this is another topic that we've been talking about that you again have heard in conversations with people at the church, right?
Well, not necessarily the church, just people I know, other believers,
Mhm.
that I know that personally feel very lonely.
Is there like a common denominator in
Mm.
that, hey, I feel really lonely? Is it like when I ask that, I mean, are they single people? Are they in families? Are they involved in churches? Are they not involved in churches? Do they have in-person work, or are they working virtually? Like, can you see any patterns in those people?
They're all gals. But no, there are believers and non-believers. There are working, non-working, working remotely. Yeah, they're all over the spectrum.
Okay.
I couldn't say
Yeah.
that like, no, it's definitely this one
Right.
demographic of gals.
Great.
Well, and I think that's kind of important to make this little distinction of loneliness as opposed to being alone, because I think a lot of what Karina said, like I think people who are feeling lonely, who are having feelings of loneliness, being lonely, can have like can be all different types of people. Can be those who work from home by themselves. Yeah. But also could be people who work in an office with a bunch of other people. Being alone is different from being lonely, because you can be with people and still feel like deep down inside that these just feelings of loneliness, that there's something off, or that you're not connecting with people, or whatever that is. And so yeah, I feel like there's a lot of different, I mean, I know Karina said she's been talking with gals. I mean, guys too, of like all over the spectrum of where you work, either in an office or at home, or single guys or married guys, or guys who are in community groups, or like plugged into a church, could still feel lonely at times.
Yeah, I think that the designation is like loneliness is a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subjective feeling. Being alone is an objective reality, right? If I take alone time, and that's like, I need to be by myself. I don't want others around. I can be alone and not feel lonely,
Right.
and vice versa. You can be in community with people and feel isolated and feel lonely.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great important distinguisher in this conversation.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys and maybe you've felt this loneliness that we're talking about before, but what are some, how can loneliness kind of show up in people's lives? Like what could that look like in somebody's life, that we could maybe there's some people listening to this that are like, no, that's not me. But what are some things that people kind of experience who do have this kind of loneliness?
I pass to the delegate from Littleton.
That's a hard question. I'm not fully sure, to be honest, Kyle. I think loneliness is one of those things that people can hide behind a mask really easily. Put on a front like everything's great, which actually I think might be part of the problem of loneliness is, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but being part of community isn't necessarily the answer if you're just showing up on kind of checked out. Like, being in community takes vulnerability and transparency and connecting. You're not going to get there instantly, but it's a process, and you have to like put in some effort. So yeah, you can show up every week and still feel really lonely, and put up a great mask like, hey, I'm doing great. I'm not. So I think it's, I don't know that it's super easy to just look at someone and be like, oh yeah, they must be super lonely.
Yeah. I think it's deeper issues. Like that could be, I mean, depression, anxiety, those sorts of things. Man, insecurities, disappointments, those sorts of things, grief can, I think, get people lonely, or this feeling of loneliness. And I think like when I think of loneliness, the thing that always comes to my mind is sadness, like just being sad about something. And that could be a lot of different things, but I do think it's, yeah, Karina, like you said, I think it's deeper. It's things that are going on, I think, in your life, that aren't so easy to pinpoint or anything like that, that might take some looking at and diving deeper into like what's going on in your life. Like, so it's not so out there in the open and easy to kind of fix or figure out.
Okay. Let me ask this. And I'm working through this in my brain as we're talking, but is the antidote to lonely being known? Because it's not necessarily just community, although we'd have to robustly define community, right? But it's not just a matter of getting with other people in proximity, you know, because you can be in relationship, even in familial relationship, and still feel lonely, still feel alone. So is the antidote being known? Like, I mean, I tell this to couples when I'm doing premarital for them, but if you think that marriage is how you stave off loneliness, you got another thing coming. Like sometimes I'll hear from couples who it's like, this is not a good match. And they're like, well, I don't want to be alone. And I'll often say there are worse things than being alone. Actually, I think it's probably a worse thing to be lonely laying in the bed next to the person who you're supposed to be known by. Right. So like, I wonder if being known is actually the fix or like the antidote. So how, like being known means that somebody has invested in you, but that you've also opened up with them, that you have shared fears, that you've shared, hopes, that you've shared sins, like those sorts of things with a person, and they know you. Like they actually, I mean, Jesus says, to those who were following him in Matthew 7, you did all this stuff, but I didn't know you. So there's something about knowing that I think is foundational in what biblical relationships are supposed to look like. So I'm working that out in my head as we're talking, just like, okay, is it possible? You can be in proximity. You can even be transparent with somebody. Like you can be the one who's trying to be known. And if they don't want to, it has to be a reciprocating thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is where my brain's going.
Yeah, I think I think you're onto something. I think, just thinking back to through my life, like some of the moments that I felt most like full or known is when people respond with like, hey, I appreciate that you did this. Or like, I noticed these things. It's like that. Oh, like it's that, people like to say that now I feel seen. But there is this piece of like, oh, they noticed I was really working hard for this and I wasn't doing it for the recognition, but they noticed anyways. Like those stir up kind of the opposite of lonely emotions.
Yeah. And I would even say, I mean, it's, Chris, as you were talking, I wanted to say like, it's as easy to me in my head as saying being close with someone, being in a relationship with people. But again, that kind of stirred up like, well, you can still be around a bunch of other people and have friendships and all that kind of stuff and still feel loneliness. But I do think like that being known piece goes a whole step further. I think it, when we talk about what, like, for instance, in Genesis, when we see, God created Adam and he talked about like man should not be alone, right? He's like, you should have a helper, somebody with you. I do think like that obviously meant more than you should just be around another person, Right. It's here is someone to have a relationship with and be known by. And so so as easy in my head as it to be like, it's about relationships. It's about being close to someone or being known by it, like that. It's more than just a relationship, but it's that being known pieces.
Yeah. Like as I'm thinking, if I was preaching on this, I would say, relationships must be there's a necessity for proximity. So I'll say that Like I do think that proximity matters in terms of loneliness. So I know it's not the only thing, but even you take your parents, for example. Let's just say that let's just say it was just your sister who was living in Thailand. Even if she got to FaceTime with you every single day, but never actually got any sort of real face-to-face proximity with you, that she could feel lonely in that. Even with constant communication, even with like robust transparency and all that stuff, like I still think there's some loneliness that would come with that. I think proximity is an essential piece. I'd say proximity. I'll say vulnerability. Like I think that the being known piece requires vulnerability. I've said in sermons for years that to be 99% known is to be 100% unknown. And by that I mean if you've got 1% that you aren't sharing with somebody, you will always have the narrative in your head, they only love me because they don't know about that thing. So to be 99% known, to hold back 1% is to be 100% unknown, because you'll always have this narrative that says they wouldn't love me the same way, they wouldn't accept me the same way if they knew about that 1%, right? So like vulnerability is necessary to stave off loneliness. Proximity, vulnerability, and then mutuality, right? Like it can't be a one-way street. It has to be reciprocated. It has to be requainted. If it's unrequainted relationship, then it's that's why a diary does not suffice, right? That's why, frankly, putting yourself out there, sometimes I see people emotionally put themselves out there on social media, and they're very vulnerable, looking for comments or looking for likes or like looking for some sort of affirmation, but that's not real relationship. I think it's got to be with people, like in proximity, with transparency or vulnerability. And it's got to be a mutuality in that.
Okay. So can I ask if, and I know I'm not just hearing this, but it's like, let's say we are a Christian and we feel lonely, like we're stuck in this place of loneliness. Is it too easy to say, like, go be in relationship with people, like go be close to people? Like what are some actionable things that if somebody's listening to this and be like I feel lonely, what can they do? Is it just as easy as like, like come to church, or is there more to it?
I think it's both easy and very hard, because some of the steps you can take are very easy, like going to church. Getting plugged into a small group or a women's group or a men's group or a young mom's group, whatever it is that you feel like you need. But it is also very hard because, like Chris said, there has to be a two-sided, it has to be both ways. So that isn't always easy to find. And I think it's really easy to get discouraged and want to give up. But I think like God did not make us to feel this way, and God made us to have friends and community in that sense. So I think giving up would be silly, because I don't think God really wants you to just stand in loneliness.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think there's this progression in this. Like, first of all, when you're lonely, normally you don't want to go see people.
Yep.
And so I think that's the first thing, is you've got to war against yourself in that first, or against the enemy, right? Like, so I think there's probably an internal battle that you've got to fight to start. But then let's take the three things that I said. You're never going to get to mutuality without proximity. So step one is you've got to go be with people, right? So that's maybe the kind of like, if it's easy or what, like you have to put yourself in proximity with other people if you'll ever be known. It will never happen if you don't start there. Second, now this one is where it gets, the ante is higher at each level, right? Second, if it's transparency or vulnerability, you might have to lead with that. Like, it's probably not going to reciprocate unless you put it out there. And the problem with that is it may not reciprocate. It might get blasted back at you. So there's risk involved in pursuing this. But then once that's out there, then then and only then do I see you having the opportunity for that kind of mutuality, which could, I think, genuinely stave off some loneliness. Even if it's just like one person. Like if there's one person who just like you are known by that person and you know that person, I mean, that's a game changer. And it's probably that you like if we're talking about a spectrum of being known, there's not a lot of people who really know me. There's gradients within there, right? But like the people who really, really know me, like I feel like I am known 100% by them, it's very, very small, right? And then it kind of branches out from there. But I think you have to put yourself out there. And so you're right. It is easy. It's as easy as getting in proximity with people, joining a small group, joining a club, I mean, whatever it might be. But then in order for it to actually stave off loneliness, it's going to cost more and more. It's going to be riskier and riskier the further you go.
Yeah. And I think even as much as we're talking about being with other people, thinking of what is at the root of loneliness and what could be super deep down inside, that I think we also have to remember maybe first to be close with God and to really take a look at your own relationship with God, like those feelings of deep loneliness, like bring those to God. Like God, I think it's important to remember that God doesn't want us to be stuck in loneliness and just kind of say this is how it is. It's kind of like when we talk about doubt a lot, like when we talk about doubt with teenagers too, it's like it's okay to doubt, but it's not okay to just stay in your, like just stay there in your doubt. You gotta like work through these things. And so I do feel like God is like, just like he did with Adam and he gave Adam someone to be with, that I don't think he wants us to stay in our loneliness. I think that's important. And so I think one of the first things we should do is be like, how is my relationship with God? Like, am I close to him? Am I close to him? And then I can be close like to others. Cause I think sometimes deep loneliness can be like, yeah, I don't want to be around people, but I also just don't want to deal with this with God. I don't want to talk about it and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important piece to just keep in the forefront is, especially as Christians, like we have a friend, like we have the Holy Spirit, like we have that. And like we already said, as much as the temptation is to kind of hide away in that loneliness, that's actually just exacerbating the issue, ultimately. So I agree, Kyle. I think that we have a friend who is closer than a brother.
Yeah.
We have that built in a relationship with Christ. And that's not like he didn't create us to just like, it's just me and Jesus and I'm okay. Like that's not how he's built us. So like there are no Lone Ranger Christians. There's there's no one like that. Additionally, I think we would be remiss if we did not at least address the fact that sometimes underneath loneliness is genuine mental health issues. And so sometimes I think depression and different things that might underlie, like, I just think we would be remiss if we just said, oh, you just need to get some friends, right? Like just get out there, put yourself out there, like there might be some underlying things that you might need to see a specialist for. And I would, again, encourage you, if you feel lonely, I would encourage you to engage with, your elder or pastor, somebody to just say, hey, help me navigate this. Is it situational? Is it seasonal? Am I actually in some depression? Like, do I need maybe to see a psychologist or, whatever it might be? I wouldn't want to throw everybody in the category of, well, just stop wallowing in your loneliness,
Right.
So,
yeah. Anything else? That might be a good place to stop right there. He was thinking. I was waiting for him to say something. He was thinking. No, I think that's great. Yeah. Again, guys, if you're listening to this and you're feeling these kind of feelings, just reach out to us, talk to us about this. Hopefully this helped in some kind of way if you're dealing with these things. But again, reach out to us. We love you. Thank you guys for this discussion.
Yep.
And thank you, church, for listening, and we'll catch you next time.